Phenomenal introduction, Justin. Thank you.
Yes. The clock has just ticked over, but I don't think we have a hugely packed agenda, so I'm not going to quite be in a hurry to start. I think MEDAC is only showing about 70 people. We might get a few more trickling in from the Gather Town hallway and whatnot.
I think the suggestion of working group theme songs might be something we have to talk about in the future, maybe at the open mic I just saw in the chat.
Yeah,
so
we might have to talk about that.
So thank you, Deb Cooley, for helping us with the notes. If she could have backup, we'd greatly appreciate it. We do have the note sites there in the really looking for just catching the major action items. We don't need the blow by blow. We do have the video. And we still don't have a volunteer. If someone can help us with Jabber, Ben and I are both kind of watching it, but a third set of eyes is always really great.
Jonathan is happy to watch the Jabber, so that'll be good. Thank you, Jonathan.
Perfect. Thank you, Jonathan.
And Michael Richardson as well. So we've got a good crew. All right, so we're up to 86 people now showing, so might as well go ahead and get started. So I'm Ben Kaduk, and my co-AD is also sending everything. So
yeah, hi, I'm Roman.
Yourself? Yeah. So
hi, I'm Roman Donato.
Yeah. Yeah, here are the security ADs. So this is the security area advisory group, the open meeting. And let us get started. So of course, this is the IETF meeting and we're under the note well. It's already Thursday, so hopefully this is not new to anyone, but we have a number of authoritative BCPs that lay out the sort of IPR regime for which that applies to the IETF meetings and IETF contributions. So please note them well. And next slide. Also, we want to remind everybody about the IETF guidelines for conduct that we want to aspire to. So if we can always make sure to be respectful and courteous to other participants, and to remember that the background and the assumptions that we bring to the table are not going to be universal. Like different people are coming in with different environments that they run in and different needs for their technical situations. And so we want to acknowledge that there are going to be different assumptions and perspectives coming in, and we want to try and understand those and work to the best solution overall. All right, next slide. So again, this is the Thursday session, which is supplementing what we had on Tuesday. So down at the bottom of the slide, we're going to have the usual administrivia, agenda bashing, and then the working reports, the ED reports, and a talk from the TLS chairs. So would anyone like to bash the agenda? Please join the queue or just start sending the audio.
Just a reminder from our SEC dispatch chairs, on the big IETF agenda, we had 2 split sessions, one on Tuesday that we ran as a split. Today on Thursday, we are on the official agenda as also running a split session with SEC dispatch, but there is going to be no SEC dispatch portion today.
Yeah, we did not have enough content to need the second half for SEC dispatch. Seeing nobody coming up, let's keep going to the working group summaries. So we've asked, of course, the working groups to send a summary to the mailing list, which helps us use time well for this session. So we've tried to get links into the slides when they exist to the mail archive. So ACE is all set. Let's keep going. ACME, I think, just met earlier this morning. COSI did meet. Hopefully we can get a report from them or just a mention at the mic today as we keep going. GNAP, I think, met earlier today as well. IBSecMe was in good shape. Lamps met. Ohio is still welcome to come to the mic to give a report as well. OpenPGP, we heard good progress from the design team. Rats had one session, and there's another session tomorrow. SACM, I think just sent it in today. Check dispatch, we had a good outcome. Suit is good. TLS, we had a good session. We'll be hearing from the chairs again as well. And then tomorrow we've got a few groups meeting. So Richard, go ahead and jump in. I think
there we go. I think my audio picked up.
Now your audio is good.
I was just going to provide a quick summary on OHI. We spent most of the time reviewing the proposed starting point drafts, and I think we did an adoption call at the end of the meeting, which was pretty favorable. Confirming that adoption call on the list right now. And documents.
I got a little bit of a compressed audio stream there, but it sounded like we had a good meeting with some adoption calls coming out. So thanks for that. It'll be exciting to see the progress going on there. So I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah, actually, just barely slip over onto 2 slides of groups not meeting. But if you go back to the first one, I try to remember a few notes on that. So Curdle is probably going to close once the last document gets through the RFC editor. It's in the queue there. And I think many of these groups are holding interims, whether dedicated or periodic regular interims. So it's not like they're not doing any work at all. And then back to slide 2, the SecEvent group is probably also going to be closing soon. There was, we finished the core drafts some time ago, and then there was energy to work on one more related draft, and we should either finish that up or just declare victory and close. So I will be trying to talk to the chairs and the working group about that in the coming weeks. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. As Ben noted, we had an interim for MLS. I did just like seconds ago send an update to the mailing list so people can see it. The nutshell here is that we're about done with the protocol draft. The next version is going to probably enter working group last call sometime in December. And then hopefully we'll get enough reviews on the architecture draft so we can working group last call that. And so then we can send both to the ISG, hopefully in the first quarter of 2022.
Great. Yeah, it'll be definitely good to have both drafts to look at together. Okay, I think we should keep going. So let's see, related work. I did want to call out UTA because there are, I believe, biz documents for both 6125 and 7525, which relate to recommendations for certificate verification and also just general TLS usage parameter guidelines. So this would be very much of interest to a large part of the community. And thank you to the Utah chairs for sending that note to the list as well. There also has been some noteworthy activity going on in the Model T program from the IAB, and I believe Yari is going to send a summary later today, I think, but it's not in quite yet. So this is an opportunity if anybody knows much about some related work, whether or not it's listed on this slide, please feel free to jump up to the mic. I think Sam Weiler also sent just now an update from the W3C, which has quite a bit of potentially interesting work going on. Just skimming the email he sent. So look for that as well.
While we have folks coming up to the mic to talk about some of these activities here, I want to mention we did hold the PrivBoF. I think it was quite successful. There was quite a lot of support voiced for it. also, what was positive out of it, we have some tangible action items on where the community thinks the scope should be tuned, and all of that is fully documented in the minutes. And I would expect in the coming weeks that there will be revisions to that draft charter, and we should have some community discussion on whether the box and the scoping of that is right and whether we can move forward.
Thanks, Roman. And I'm not seeing anybody joining the queue either, so I guess we can keep going. And of course, we'll have the open mic at the end of the meeting as well, if there's more to cover. So I guess I can say a few words about my two AD sponsored drafts here. The Security TXT is in the RC editor queue, and it's actually still waiting on me. We had been preparing to go forward with some sort of very generic ABNF for the file format, but I got some updated ABNF from Murray that actually can represent the full PGP clear sign header, footer, and whatnot. And so I need to actually go and validate that and get another review, and then we should be able to go forward with Security TXT. The numeric ID's set considerations is still a little bit stalled. I didn't really make any progress on that since IETF 111. Roman, over to you.
Yeah, so for my documents, the updated ERS, ASN kind of one modules are with the RFC editor. I think it's all quite straightforward from there. And then I just started processing the update to 6931, the BIS document, to get the new URIs for all the various XML security kinds of things. That's really new in terms of being in revised kind of AD. I expect we can probably get that buttoned up relatively quickly. We do still need W3C concurrence and kind of feedback on it before we get to IETF last call. Thanks. All right, other things to note from Ben and my kind of perspective. The first thing we just wanted to call out is earlier this week, we updated the wiki that talks about the security area to refresh the content and make it hopefully a little more accessible to understand how to bring new work, and for others perhaps not steeped in all the different sec area kind of processes about how Sector works and how this venue kind of SAG works. So please take a look. If you think we're missing content, by all means kind of let us know. We'd like this to be something that is a resource and is accessible to folks. Other highlights, and this is a repeat that we do really every time we meet here in SAG, is we just like to reiterate that based on the work done by Sector and the process that Ben and I go through in all the AD and telechat reviews, there are recurring issues that do come up fairly commonly. We do have those documented, and as in augmentation, as folks are getting ready to publish their documents, or as working groups are ready to send things to IETF last call, we would strongly urge them to consult that list to make sure that it does not manifest itself in that document. Also, in the spirit of transparency, this is not a new feature, but it constantly actually kind of comes up that folks don't realize that this is possible. If you want to know what Ben's queue looks like or my queue looks like, where we're holding documents, what the rest of the sec area kind of looks like in terms of processing after it exits the working group. So in IESG review or in last call, you can use those two URLs to get that status information. And then the other thing we wanted to highlight is one of the actions we are holding is the continued thread on what we do with post-quantum agility. So since that does come up, and it came up in the SAG session, kind of in session 1, we did make a summary page that you see referenced there that pulls together all the different conversations that we've had. And we still have an open thread on the mailing list to give us more feedback on that proposed charter, so we know how to move forward.
Yeah, I think we've got one reply to that thread so far, so it'd be good to get additional input.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of a mismatch between some of the private communication we're getting supporting it and any commentary on that mailing list, and that's what we really need to help us figure out how to proceed. There's been some changes in where we stand with working groups. I know we often kind of talk about broadly in the IETF how has COVID impacted the creation of new work. So from the SEC area perspective, since the last time we've met, we have spun up 3 new security-focused working groups. We talked about OHI in the working group reports. Dance is going to be meeting for the first time tomorrow, and SCIM, which is not in the security area but highly related to kind of security, based on historical reasons, is still staying in ART, and that reopened and met earlier this morning for the first time. In terms of work closing, so the trans working group concluded since the last time we met, and in terms of major rechartering, SUIT is now actively kind of talking about how to do a little bit more based on the work that's already getting ready to move outside the working group on the core manifest, and now we're talking about extensions. And, Ben and I can't reiterate enough the help that the sector provides, and that should read since we last got together in IETF 11. Those reviewers, provided detailed things for IETF last call. They provided detailed feedback for the telechat, and these contributions, these reviews directly impact the quality and the security properties of those documents. And it's tremendous that it's done. We thank you so much for making it all possible to us and really contributing to making the internet a more secure place because you've invested your time.
Yeah, definitely a big thanks to all the sector reviewers. It's a real big help.
Okay, so with that, we're ready to switch over to our first and only formal agenda item. So the TLS chairs are going to talk to us about what recommended guidance looks like. So Joe, are you briefing, or Sean? We'll get your slides up.
Yeah, I can present. Perfect. Do you want me to?
Nope. I'm granting you permissions.
Okay, let me figure out which one this is. That must be this one. All right, here we are. Thanks everybody for joining. Good afternoon, evening, morning. So we're going to talk about 8447 BIS and the IANA TLS recommended column. Many of you may be aware that RFC 8447, which is IANA considerations for TLS, defined a recommended column for most TLS registries. And this has been populated with either the character Y or the character N. The character Y meaning generally this parameter is generally recommended for implementations to support, and N is generally recommended for an implementation not to support. This is, probably most driven by cipher parameters, crypto parameters such as cipher suites and groups and things like that, but it applies to other things such as extensions and other TLS parameters as well. In order to get something assigned a Y, it requires IETF standards action. So part of the feedback we received is that maybe 2 values aren't enough because N could result from various different situations. One could be just that we haven't evaluated it, so we get many requests for ciphers that we often will allow that really may not have been evaluated by anybody in the IETF or in our community, and so it's hard to make any statements about them, and it's not something that we could necessarily do to evaluate all these things, nor maybe should we. There are also things that we would not recommend in any circumstance. Perhaps it's a deprecated algorithm like RC4 or MD5. And then there may be cases where something is applicable only in certain cases. So in the latest version of RFC 8447 BIS, we took the approach of adding an additional state here. So there's yes is recommended for general use as it was before. no, that parameters are discouraged for general use. And then there's, a lack of any character at all would be the parameters are unevaluated. This is saying the IETF hasn't evaluated this. There's no statement to be made here by the IETF. Now, in the TLS working group on Tuesday morning, we also presented this as part of the changes in RFC 8447 bis. And the additional feedback that we got was that, hey, perhaps there should be more or different meanings here. So, for example, to indicate when something is deprecated or something is limited use. And since these things this kind of arrangement is probably of interest to the security community as a whole, we wanted to bring it here and have some discussion in SAG on what would be good values, what should be communicating here, because it's something that maybe other working groups would pick up. And so that's where we are. So if you'd like to come to the mic and chat, that would be wonderful. I don't know, Sean, do you have anything to add?
No, I believe you sufficiently captured all of the points.
Hecker.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think this is like slightly more complicated than perhaps it needs to be. Like in particular, I think we could put together N and D into one thing, but I also don't really care very much. I think it'd be fine. I guess what I would say is it seems like some of these are going to require some sort of like explanation, in particular, especially like the N. And so like if you're going to have an explanation, maybe you can fold N and D together. And I guess I don't really understand the difference between N and L, but again, I don't also care that much. I guess one thing I would say is that I don't think we should rename. I don't think N should be used in. The one thing I do feel strongly about is that we should not use N with the meaning you have it here, and the reason is because it already has an existing meaning, which is the thing you have with blank space now. And so like I don't care if we rename the field, and then we can rename them or whatever, but like just don't keep the thing called recommended and have N mean N now means something it didn't used to be. Is like my thesis. But yeah, so I'm willing to hum on basically anything because like I just think like it's like not that big a deal which ones we do. So like let's just get it done.
Okay, fair enough. Stephen?
Yeah, I think the current state of play is better. I don't think any of these changes are improvements. In particular, the one on screen here. What does evaluated by the IETF mean? I mean, and people will argue that, and they'll come along and say, you said deprecated or limited, and how did you evaluate my thing? And we're going to argue about all the possible things. So I think 2 values is the right answer. I don't care if it's called N or any other set of characters, but anything beyond that is going to waste lots more time for people involved in the IETF. And I don't personally believe that there's any additional clarity by having N blank D or L or anything more than one negative value is useless in my opinion.
Alrighty. Hannes?
Hi. And very early in the slide deck, you talked about, or you had different rules for behaving, and you talked about like people have different perspectives, work on the internet, but then there are all sorts of deployment circumstances. And one thing that I noticed is there's, of course, the web is quite important to everyone, but DLS is used outside the web space, and often there's kind of a ignorance to those other uses be outside the web, and that's where it gets tricky, because some of the extensions we work on are used in those spaces, and they are used on millions and billions of devices, but they are just not the web, and so people treat them as not fit for general use, because for them the general use is the web only, right? They don't care about these other uses, and that's why we have dedicated documents that talk about the applicability of DLS in other domains. And for whatever reason, we try to sum all of this up in an entry in a table in the INA registry. If nobody would look at that, it wouldn't be a problem. But of course, people don't read the documents; they just look at the table. That's my problem.
Now, Hannes, one question, would it help if I don't believe we link to documents, just like if we were to have something that was limited or deprecated, would that help? Would having a link to the document that described why or made that statement?
For example, for the limited use, like having a document that describes what the use is would obviously be valuable for someone who looks at that table. But of course, like at what point do we actually replicate the documents themselves, right? So
yeah. Okay, Robin. Robin, are you?
I'm showing Phil next in the queue.
Okay. All right,
I think
Phil.
Rob dropped off as far as I can tell.
Maybe he took himself off queue. Yeah, I'm also a two-stater. I think that basically we should not distinguish between stuff we don't recommend and stuff we haven't evaluated. We should just have a list of the stuff that we have looked at and recommend, and the only thing that we'll do for anything else is give it a code point. And the reason for that is that I specifically don't want to get into the business of IETF evaluating crypto. I'm not sure who does. I mean, the only mechanism that we know of to evaluate a crypto algorithm is a crypto competition that takes 4 or 5 years, and that's our mechanism, whether it's NIST that runs it or CFRG. And somebody at IETF looking through a bunch of papers and not seeing something bad, that's not a crypto algorithm review. So I just don't want to get anywhere close to that. So I want to have as small a number of recommended algorithms as possible, preferably no more than 2. The one that we use and the backup, and everything else. I'd even like to see a separate table. Put the code points in a separate table, and anybody who wants to, first come, first served. And if we start to run out of code points, find a hack that allows people to use an OID in its place. That would require the negotiation scheme to be extended, of course, but I don't want to get into telling people that their crypto is good, because nobody has that expertise.
Okay. John?
I agree very much with what Hannes said about different use cases. I think it's important to differentiate between these. I don't know, I just read the BIS document. I see nowhere here that it says general use, or that the recommended column has anything with use to do. It seems to still be support. Is that something new that has been added recently, or?
No, that's just a mistake on my part.
Yeah, I think that that maybe illustrates the hardness of understanding this recommended column if the chairs cannot understand it either. Yeah, I rest my case.
So, Yov, I'm going to jump in ahead of you just to do jabber management here. Robin's comment, because there was no audio, is for any value other than why, yes, implementers will want or need to know why, in which case they should read the RFC, so an extra 1 byte value in the fields doesn't add anything.
Okay, Yoav?
I pretty much want to agree with that. So one of the things that 8447 did that I think is wrong is that they made the same column for all the IANA registries for TLS. So this yes, no, or unknown is very fitting for the Circa suite, because we can say that, yeah, ASGCM is yes, RC4 is no. This new cipher coming out of the Ukrainian government, I don't know. So that makes sense. But extensions, when are you ever going to do a no extension? We'll just not standardize it if we don't like the extension. So yeah, I know we can find an example where we didn't like an extension anymore. So in my opinion, there's the yes, the things that we don't want people to use. Everything else has nuance, like deprecated or limited use. It's good for this one. Everything else is nuance, so go read the document that describes the extension or cipher suite or whatever to know whether it's applicable or not. So I think, yeah, 3 values of yes, no, and go read the document are what we really need.
Okay, thanks. Rich?
Yeah. I think we need to handle, oh, this was, recommended, and then there's, one of those silly die drafts came out, and we need to change that value from, we need to change the value. So I don't care what the value is. As commented on the chat, a space as an indicator is a bad idea in terms of, accessibility, readability, understandability. Pick some character, make it a shrug, make it a poop emoji, whatever. But my biggest concern is whatever set of parameters or values we pick, it should be possible to unambiguously and without judgment calls decide what they are. Because otherwise it's going to come to, it'll be written in the RFC, and that may show up via the ISE path, which doesn't really have, doesn't reflect IETF consensus, or you'll defer it to, the designated experts, which are currently me, Yov, and Nick, and I don't want that. So as long as you can describe an algorithm that is determinable and not halting, I don't care what letters you pick. We'll just follow those directions.
Okay, thanks. Watson?
Watson Lad, Cloudflare. I see there's a lot of discussion about wanting to use non-recommended extensions and ciphers as sort of some of the motivation for changing this, but I haven't really heard specific examples or where we've had debates in the TLS working group about depreciation. People saying, well, we can't declare something as depreciated because it's still in use. And really, I think we should be viewing changes here as the start of the depreciation process. We need a way to signal that you should be moving off this. And we should expect an ecosystem whose participants have a way to move off of things. And I think that when we talk about limited use, I'm not really sure it has a place. I like the idea of an explicit depreciation mark, although I'm not sure what the exact difference between D and N is. And again, I think a space is not a great idea. Not sure what we could put in, but I also don't think we should be limited to single letters. I think something like not evaluated can fit perfectly fine.
Okay, thanks. You're on.
So as background, I'm co-author on 7525, the TLS BCP, and now 7525 BIS. If we go into nuance here, we will want support documentation, and that means that people will be working on documents that explain why something is deprecated or of limited use. And I think it will make the current situation where we have deprecation documents coming from the TLS working group and us in Utah trying to chase them or make sure there are no conflicts. And yeah, we are talking to one another, but we're really duplicating work and setting ourselves for duplication and conflicts and all sorts of funny situations. Thank you.
So are you, is it a coordination issue, or is it like we shouldn't be deprecating things, or?
At the moment, it's coordination issue. I'm not sure we should be deprecating things, or I think 7525 did it well and was well accepted for the things it did. And we could use the same mechanism. Perhaps 5 years between versions of 7525 is too much, perhaps not. But I think it's a discussion we need to have rather than just running two processes in parallel.
Okay, thanks. Becker?
All right, I'd like to make several points. First, like we absolutely do need this column for extensions. There are lots of extensions which are not defined by the IETF and we're just reserving code points for. To give you some examples, 3 TLMSP ones, which I had to approve, which involved reading like a ton of specs about like, about like auto stuff, which I didn't bother read. Ticket pinning, password salt, password protect, password clear. So these are like all things which like need code point reservations, but which we do not think are like we have no opinion on, or probably maybe secretly think are bad. And so like we absolutely need a column for these things. So now I think the question now becomes, what is the concept of column? And for all of these, and I think there are several, so I think like obviously we need Y, and I think Semantics and so far have included we didn't look and we think this is bad, right? Those are the two things that like N basically means, or I think also like, and I'll get back to this limited use case thing. Now, but separately, so IETF has got a bunch of things that have ends on them, and then separately we go on publishing documents that say this thing is actually bad. Like we publish, MD5 die, or SHA-1 die, right? And so I do think it's in value to have a way to indicate that the IETF has like actively looked at this thing and now thinks it's like actively bad and do not be used. And so I think that motivates some sort of bad thing. And I understand like the concerns. There's gonna be like a lot of like debate about that, but I don't think there actually has to be, because like we didn't have like we already had that debate about whether to publish the documents in the first place. And so like, the point of this column in this case is merely, as Rich says, to memorialize the decision the IETF has already made, which these protocols are bad, right? So I don't think that actually requires like a lot of litigation beyond that. So like what I propose is a minimum 3 states, one of which is good, which requires IETF specification, one of which is we haven't looked at it, which requires a nothing, and one of which is this is bad, which also requires an IETF specification. And as I say, since we're already doing all those things anyway, it's a mechanical transformation from the work we've done. Now, the one that is like slightly difficult, I think, is a sort of limited use one. And Ira McDonald raised this a little bit in the chat, and the cases for those limited use ones, and yes, DKG is right, there should be a reference. The case of limited use ones is there are a bunch of cases where we've had to make unpleasant compromises about the security of the system because of some case where there's like less bandwidth, less CPU or something like that, right? And so like a good example is like CCM8. And so I think what we could try to stuff that into the yes, no, into the yes, no opinion bucket, which I suppose in those cases would go in no opinion. I think we all agree those aren't like optimal cases, right? And so I think there's some argument to be made to allow them to have some, as you all have said, the microstrain environment need these algorithms use less memory. So I think there's like some case loads to have like their own marker, but like also willing to have, like, I think if we simply had a free-form field that went in no opinion, that'd be okay as well. As I said, I do think we need at least those 3 states because I think it's kind of weird for us to go around. It's like the semantics at N are like we haven't looked, and complaining that we looked and this is terrible, like seems like a mistake. And I hear people saying there'll be a lot of debate about this, but since like we've already, as I say, we've already absorbed that debate when we decided to publish these documents in the first place.
Yep, makes sense. All right, is there...
Do you want to try to do DKG's idea of trying to slim down to 2, 3, or more so we can try to focus the conversation?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what I can definitely see that, you know, from the discussion, like what we have here, we like N and space could be combined, I think, because they're really, there's more states than I think than anybody has asked for. So we'd have, and I think there is reason to do deprecated. I think there still could be debate about that, but I think some of the concerns of how do we determine something's deprecated, deprecation like recommendation requires some sort of document action. But I haven't followed exactly what DKG said. So if you have that.
And was just to do a call to see whether like we should just keep it as is with Y or no, expand it to 3, or do more. So
my idea was just to offer 3 hums, and tell people to only raise your hand and don't not raise your hand, and just raise your hand for the one of the 3 that you prefer, or if you prefer more than one, you could raise your hand multiple times, and then we get a count of who's going for, who wants to keep it at 2 options, who wants to go to 3, and who thinks that more than 3 is important.
Okay. So the 2 options would be as they are today, which is yes and not.
Yes and not yes.
Evaluated. Yes and not yes. Right. Okay. And then 3 would be yes and not yes and definitely no.
Right.
Right.
Which I called YN bad.
YN bad.
So we keep the labels Y and N as they are.
And then there would be, then the question would be for more. So can I run the thing, or do the chairs have to run that? I think the chairs have to run
the chairs have to do that. Let me just post the candidate text before we get started on all 3.
Yep.
Sorry, the line breaks. All right, so it's yes, no. 2 is yes, no,
yes, bad.
Unknown.
Yes, no, and bad.
And 3 is we need to talk more because it's more than the 3 states.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to do the hand raise. And it's just, we're not going to look at the explicit do not raise hand option. We're just going to look at the count of raise hand. Okay, so this is going to be the yes and no. As just the 2 choices. So like the only 2 states in the registry column. And Michael, I think you were briefly in the mic queue. I don't know if that was a misclick.
you think we should only have 2 states, right? And if you want 3 states or 4 states, you should vote later, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And then after that, if someone doesn't like any of those 3 options, you can come to the mic and tell us about it.
Okay, I guess the counts basically stopped going up. So in this, we had 15 hand raises for the 2 option yes or no. So this would be, so the next poll is going to be for the 3 option case. Yes, no, and, or yes, it was yes, no opinion, and bad.
Yes, yes, no,
Okay,
bad.
check. And again, you can of course click the do not raise hand button, but that is not part of the data set that we expect to be looking at. Okay, I guess we'll call that pretty stable. So that's 32 for the 3 option case. And then the third thing we're going to vote for was, I guess, more than 3 options, or requires further discussion about what they are. I'm frantically trying to keep up with the chat. Did I end the last ballot?
It just disappeared for me.
I apologize. I accidentally hit that button.
Okay, so I guess I will just run the same thing again because we closed it too quickly.
Sorry about that.
No, it happens. The big red button is right there if you have the right permissions, and who can resist pushing on the big red button?
And just a reminder, if you previously were trying to fill out this 3rd poll, you need to decide again positively to raise your hand here if you want to be counted.
Okay, I think that's looking pretty stable as well. So I will deliberately end the raise hand session now. So that was 18 hand raised for the more than 3 options case. So I mean, that's a modest preference for the 3 option case, it looks like. But perhaps not a truly definitive conclusion. So I guess my own personal stance, which I'll take because I already had the mic on, is that it sort of seems like we have enough support to say let's actually write a draft for this 3 option case and try and get more feedback on that. And of course, if people want to write up the other cases as well in more detail, that's obviously fine. But this is probably a path forward. Joe, Sean, does that seem like something?
Yeah, I think that sounds good to me. I think we'll write that up and see what it looks like, and then we'll obviously get more feedback as we go.
Drop in a link to the repo if somebody wants to write text for PRs. in the chat. Thanks.
Okay. So is that enough of the feedback that you wanted from this presentation slot?
This is excellent. And I guess, you know, it's the TLS working group doing this thing, but if other working groups are adopting it or are thinking about it, that they should think along the same lines possibly.
Right. And I will just note that I did not read all of the chat, but I see a little bit of discussion going by about the relationship between the work of the Utah group and having this sort of registry column at all. But I think that would probably be something more to take to the list.
Also seems like the other issue to take to the list is what happens to the L category that was previously talked about.
Right.
From my perspective, I don't have any problem if like a document is defining the use of something that it points, you know, can get pointed to from the registry. You can always include more references there. Typically, you know, most of the things we're talking about have been cipher suites, which maybe there's a whole lot of references get added that way. But if it's a particular extension that comes in, you know, automotive use case or whatever is the one that was being discussed. I mean, the extension comes in, there's a reference column for what that is, and it gets an N, and that's okay. People can go read why the N is. We do have to expect it. I mean, I know that a lot of this problem is that people that aren't reading the documents that are referenced in the IANA considerations section, but that's why it's there. So at some point we have to kind of push them to do a little work.
Okay. Chris, go ahead. Or maybe that was a spurious queue entry from Chris Ignacio. Roman, do you want to bring up the chair slides just so we can put the open mic slide up? But as we prefaced into that talk, that was the TLS recommended column was the only scheduled agenda item we have. So now we're into the open mic section. So please join the queue.
Seeing anyone jump up to the queue here?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it either. We are actually doing okay on the time management with our scheduled 1 hour that we had for SAG, leaving space for SEC dispatch if they needed it.
Okay.
Oh, Chris reports that he was trying to get in the queue, but his audio is broken. He wanted Sean Turney to clarify on the automotive use case if there are active algorithms for automotive that aren't recommended for general use.
I do not, so I don't know that specific list. I was probably mixing the algorithm and extension uses in my head, because typically, you know, like one document points to the algorithms that gets defined, and then it just gets used in a bunch of places. So there are lots of references there. They get pulled in that way. So there would already be a, hey, it's not useful here. And then if people really wanted to know, they could figure it out that way. With an extension, it's slightly more direct, and that the reference is right there for whatever the extension is, if there was one defined specifically for the automotive use case or whatever use case there is.
Okay, and I see Chris says thanks in the chat, so thank you. But in that time, there has not been anyone else joining the queue, so I think it is time to say thank you, everybody, and give you some time back.
Okay, thanks so much, everyone.
See y'all later. Bye.